Welcome to the BEASTwriter podcast. I am your host, Ryan Sakamoto, and tonight we're going to be discussing my 2021 NFL Mock Draft 1.0. So let's get started. Now, this is my first of 3 mock drafts leading up to the festivity. If you're new to following me, or for those who don't know, I like to break down my podcast. Well, my podcast too, but I like to break down my NFL mock drafts into 3 different parts. So I will have a mock draft 1.0, which is around this time, around the Super Bowl time, and then I release my second mock draft as it gets closer to free agency, and then I release my third and final mock draft just days leading up to the NFL draft. And the reason I do that is for a number of different reasons. One, we don't know what's going to happen, right? We don't know the unknowns. Things can change from now until then. And when it comes to trades, when it comes to unrestricted free agency, coaching staff shakeups, injuries, salary cap casualties, that's all moving parts into formulating these mock drafts. Because if you see a player that you like, if you're a GM and you see a player that you like for instance, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but for instance, let's say JJ Watts gets released by the Houston Texans and by the new regime that comes in because they need to save $17.5 million, which is about their balance that they need to make up anyways, and there's no dead money tied to it. You release JJ Watt, for instance, and then you save money there. And then let's say if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, hypothetically, they don't have the money, but I'm just putting a hypothetical scenario out there. And, we need a defensive end because we just released Stephon Tuitt, let's just say, or traded Stephon Tuitt, let's just say, hypothetically. Then they go after JJ Watt, and then they team TJ and JJ, and now they have a formidable, dynamic brother duo. Make sense? Makes sense. All right, so that's why I kind of make these mock drafts in 3 different parts because, again, there's a lot of moving parts, and we really don't know what's going to happen without free agency taking place in those other pieces I just mentioned. All right, so that's why I formulate my mock draft and game plan accordingly. But enough about the process. Let's get to the draft. Remember, my mock drafts are based on how I actually see the draft playing out and not necessarily what I would do if I was the GM. Make sense? Makes sense. All right, my big board is on a different scale. That's my top list ranked 1 to 50 on who my top prospects are coming out of the draft. But as far as the mock draft, I like to do it based on what I see realistically happening, not what I would do. And that's kind of how I formulate my mock drafts. Kind of similar to Mel Kiper, Todd McShay, Daniel Jeremiah, Charles Davis. You get the picture. All right, so let's get started. Well, the Jaguars hold the number 1 overall pick. This is the 3rd time that GM Trent Baalke has held 2 first-round picks in the same NFL draft. He did it back in 2010 where he drafted Anthony Davis, right tackle, out of the University of Rutgers, moving up 2 spots from 13 to 11, and then also doubled down on that with the addition of Idaho product Mike Iupati, all right, at number 17. Now, that was his first year as acting GM of the draft, and then he struck again in 2016 on his way out of San Francisco in his last draft there. He also had 2 first-round draft picks, and he drafted defensive tackle DeForest Buckner out of University of Oregon and another Pac-12 player with Joshua Garnett out of Stanford. So if you look at those all those 4 players, he likes to build teams from the inside out, and that's his MO. That's his method of operation, right? So, all right, ironically, lightning strikes again for Trent Baalke as he begins his tenure with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He now holds 2 first-round draft picks again. So what do they do at number 1? Well, it goes without saying it's going to be Trevor Lawrence, generational talent, yada, yada, yada. We get it. But aside from that, Baalke has an affinity for Clemson players. And you take a look back at past behavior as it pertains to future behavior. You look at players that he drafted. The guys like freaking Brandon Thomas, right? Guys like Bradley Pinion, the punter. How many punters get drafted in the NFL? Bradley Pinion did by Trent Baalke out of Clemson. And then you look at players that he gave private workouts or pre-draft visits to. Mackenzie Alexander is another name. Martavius Bryant. Cornerback Rashad Brilliant, who's going to be playing in the Super Bowl for the 2nd straight year with the Kansas City Chiefs. He was highly sought after by GM Trent Baalke's scouting department there. And then he also gave private workouts to the following players: Kevin Dodd, Shaq Lawson, and BJ Goodson. So when you put that body of work all together and kind of connect the dots, you know that Trent Baalke has affinity for Clemson players. That's one of the things that I put in my notes. I keep notes on all GMs and all their tendencies in order to formulate my mock drafts, and that's the one of the tendencies that I have is he favors South Carolina products and Clemson products. Now, We can all talk about the ACL injuries and how he's tied to those players as well, with DeAndre Smelter, a few other players. But we're not going to get into that. This is not a Trent Baalke podcast. This is a top 5 2021 NFL mock draft. But you guys get the picture. Certain GMs have certain biases toward certain conferences or certain players. We've seen it with, take for instance, Baltimore Ravens, right? You look at Eric DeCosta. He haven't admitted to having an affinity for Oklahoma players. So you guys can kind of see what happens there. The list goes on. You want to stay in the Big 12? Go ahead. Let's take a look at the Seattle Seahawks, John Schneider. Look at the Big 12 products that he drafted in the first round. Jordan Brooks, most recently out of Texas Tech. So the list goes on and on and on. And I keep notes of everything because, like I said, I want to make the most accurate guess possible in order to formulate the most accurate mock draft that I can be happy with. All right. So moving on, Trevor Lawrence going number 1. That's not a question. The draft starts at number 2, and what do the New York Jets do? Well, they have a dilemma, right? The quarterback position is a huge dilemma. Do they keep Sam Darnold? Do they trade for Deshaun Watson? Or do they stay pat at number 2 and draft the quarterback of the future with Zach Wilson or Justin Fields? Pick your poison. They can go in a number of different directions, right? So from a BPA standpoint, and getting back to Watson, let's just talk about Watson. I did a podcast on Deshaun Watson earlier. I included that in the description below. Also left it in the comments section as a pinned post, so you can go ahead and watch my potential trade scenario for Deshaun Watson going to the New York Jets. But although I think that's a likely scenario, nothing is official, so we're just going to roll with the player at 2 for now because, like I said, yeah, it's all hearsay, like rumors. And at number 2, what do? Well, if they don't strike a deal for Deshaun Watson, they roll with Sam Darnold, you're going to have to find Sam Darnold some help. It's going to be on the offense side of the ball. And the New York Jets offensive line was horrendous last year. The worst in the NFL, period. And although they drafted left tackle Mekhi Becton out of Louisville last year in the first round, they're going to have to double down on that and get Penei Sewell. If you're looking at it from a needs meets best player available standpoint, Penei Sewell fits the bill, right? But if you're looking at it from a vertical board standpoint, then DeVonta Smith has to be that guy because DeVonta Smith is head and above shoulders over Penei Sewell, in my opinion. And the Heisman winner just holds the better skill set overall ceiling than Penei Sewell. I'm not saying Penei Sewell is not going to be a great player. He is a very talented player. It's not going to be an easy decision because in that war room, you're going to have some debate. Who's more important? Well, from a quarterback position, you're going to be like, oh, Sam Darnold needs help, man. He needs offensive line help. And it doesn't matter if we have DeVonta Smith on our roster because if he can't get open or doesn't have the time to get open because of our shaky, suspect offensive line, what good is it? If Sam Darnold doesn't have enough time to go through his progressions and he's always on his back, what good is it? If our running game can't get open because of our stupid rushing attack on our offensive line, what good is it? Then the argument can be made for DeVonta. Well, we can always find someone in free agency. We have $65 million plus in salary cap space. Let's go ahead and make a move from one of these free agents out there, maybe Alejandro Villanueva, something like that. And then we can roll with a DeVonta Smith because the drop-off from DeVonta Smith from the next best wide receiver is bigger than the drop-off from Penei Sewell from Rashawn Slater. That's the type of discussion that's going to be taking place. Just saying. So when you look at the New York Jets horizontal board, you have a vertical board and you have a horizontal board, right? The horizontal board is the top players at their respective positions. So Penei Sewell, DeVonta Smith, neck and neck, 1A and 1A, right? But if you look at the horizontal board, DeVonta Smith is the far better player. So that's where the dilemma is going to come into place. It's like choosing a hot girl with a nice booty or a hot baddie with a nice rack. Like pick your poison, bro. All right, decisions. Games are won down in the trenches. No quarterback can have success with a suspect offensive line. No wide receiver can have success if the receivers can't get open. No running game can have success without offensive line opening holes for them, unless you're Barry Sanders. Yeah, unless you're Barry Sanders, a future Hall of Famer, of course, but you get the point. How many young quarterbacks get drafted in the NFL with little to no help from the offensive line? There's a reason why these top teams draft at the top. These top poor teams draft at the top. These teams that suck draft at the top. It's mainly because they can't win their games down in the trenches. They can't win their battles down in the trenches. And games are won down in the trenches. You start from the inside out. That's GM Joe Douglas's MO. And the way I see it playing out, I think they're going to roll with Penei Sewell because he is a better play and a safer bet in terms of Sam Darnold's progression as an NFL quarterback. You can find a wide receiver later in the draft, although DeVonta Smith is, to me, is a generational talent. I believe that Joe Douglas would rather roll with Penei Sewell, giving his franchise quarterback, whether it's Watson, whether it's Sam Darnold or someone else, a bodyguard for the foreseeable future and someone he can work with Mekhi Becton on one side and Penei Sewell on the other. All right, so that's my pick, Penei Sewell at number 2 to the New York Jets. Now let's take out the Miami Dolphins with their first round pick number 3. So I stated on an earlier podcast that the Dolphins would take DeVonta Smith. Also laid it out on Twitter that they would roll with DeVonta Smith at 3 and Najee Harris at 18. Been saying that since day one. I think I said it back in October. Check the Twitter receipts. It's all up there for you guys. But yeah, nothing changed my logic there. DeVonta Smith is the best football player in this draft, in my opinion. Yes, head and shoulders above Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion. And I have DeVonta Smith right up there at the very top. I think DeVonta Smith would likely want to play with Tua Tagovailoa. He even said it in his Senior Bowl interview yesterday that he would love to play with Tua Tagovailoa, and for obvious reasons why. He said that he would love to run it back, and they had talks about it. So that's just a little tidbit for you guys. He wants to go to Miami and would welcome a move to Miami and be reunited with Tua Tagovailoa. And let's look at it from the Miami Dolphins standpoint, where they're coaching in the Senior Bowl, so they're going to get a lot of face-to-face interaction with DeVonta Smith. I'm sure they already talked to Tua about DeVonta Smith's work ethic, how he is in the locker room, they already know how he is on the field. They want to know who he is off the field. And the Senior Bowl is the only opportunity that these NFL teams get a chance to talk to these players, because there's no NFL Combine this year, which is why the Senior Bowl is even more so highlighted than in years past. And DeVonta Smith, to me, is a perfect fit for the Miami Dolphins because, one, you have Devontae Parker, and then you team him up with DeVonta Smith. Well, now you have 2 wide receiver threats outside the numbers who can stretch the field between the 20s. But then you also have tight end Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki is an underrated tight end for the Miami Dolphins, and he can work down the seams, and that will open up the passing game all the way around, because we know DeVonta Smith, if you watch the Alabama games, he can be used in a lot of different ways, whether it's bubble screens, whether it's end arounds, reverses, quick slants, you name it. Corners, post, fly routes, he can run the full entire route tree, and he comes off his stem hot. So I think DeVonta Smith would be a perfect addition to the Miami Dolphins at number 3 as they go BPA. GM Chris Greer gets more ammo for Tua Tagovailoa, and they roll with another Alabama product. Roll Tide roll. Now let's go into the number 4 pick overall, the Atlanta Falcons, right? The Atlanta Falcons have a new head coach, a new GM in town. Out is Thomas Dimitroff. Gone is Dan Quinn. In is Jerry Fontenot. And in is Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. He had Ryan Tannehill. No doubt in my mind that they're going to go quarterback at number 4. It's hard to wipe your hands clean of Matt Ryan because of the dead money associated to his big money contract. But in the end, you're going to have to find a replacement, similar to what the Packers did with Aaron Rodgers drafting Jordan Love last year. And I see a similar scenario playing out in Atlanta. And you take a look into it, and Zach Wilson's going to be that guy. He's a dual threat quarterback. He has similar skill sets to Ryan Tannehill, has the arm strength in my opinion, has the accuracy. The one thing I will say is that sometimes he's a little inconsistent on throwing to receivers in stride. But aside from that, I like Zach Wilson and the skill set he brings to the table. He would be a welcome addition. And keep in mind, this is a hot spot for a trade, because if you're an NFL team looking for a young quarterback for your future and you see Zach Wilson still on the board at number 4, because the Miami Dolphins obviously are going to take DeVonta Smith, that's a hot spot for where a trade can trade up. And then if you're the Atlanta Falcons, you're looking at it and seeing where you can trade back and still get that coveted player, maybe a few a few positions back and still pick up draft capital in return. So look for that to take place, because Atlanta Falcons have a lot of holes as well. You have guys like Julio Jones, who's basically tailoring toward the end of his career. He's been banged up a lot over the past 2-3 years, dealing with a lot of injuries, and they do have Calvin Ridley. But if you can get another product later in the draft, like let's say you move down in the teens or even the early 10 13 range and still pick up more draft capital, you can get a guy like Jalen Waddle, right? Another Roll Tide product. So a lot of things can happen. Again, we don't know what's going to happen with free agency. We don't know what's going to happen with Matt Ryan. For all we know, he could be on trade bait. It's hard to move Matt Ryan's contract, but again, I've seen way worse things happen. There's been a lot of surprising things happen in the past, and as you guys know, anything is possible in the NFL. Anything is possible. So look for Zach Wilson to be that guy. We're making the pick right now. All right. And last but not least, let's move on. At pick number 5, the Cincinnati Bengals. Where do they go? Well, Joe Burrow was obliterated. Blah, 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 blah. He was just demolished in his rookie year, and he can't take hits like that. So I already alluded to it earlier, that when the Jets were on the clock, the difference between Penei, Sewell, and Rashawn Slater. Rashawn Slater is my second best offensive tackle. He should be the selection at number 5 overall. And although I believe that Ja'Marr Chase would be in the running, because that would be uniting two LSU products, Joe Burrow to Ja'Marr Chase, I think that the Bengals are smart enough to know, and the GM is smart enough to know, that you need to protect Joe Burrow with another bodyguard, and that's where Rashawn Slater comes into play. It would be dumb to think that Joe Burrow doesn't need help along the offensive line. You look at that roster and it's decimated. They have players like Jonah Williams, right? Jonah Williams from Alabama is another guy that they have, but he's been injured, right? So although I believe that Jonah Williams could be that guy, it's really hard to tell what direction they're going to go in, because, again, 2 guys come to mind, and that's it. It's just Ja'Marr Chase from LSU, be reunited with Joe Burrow, or they go Rashawn Slater and get the number 2 tackle in the NFL draft. I think they're going to roll with the number 2 tackle in the NFL draft. And I'm just looking up Jonah Williams' stats right now. And he was a 2019 first-round pick, number 11 overall. You look at his measurables: 23 reps on the bench, had a 4.79 20-yard shuttle, 8.103 cone drill, 28-inch vertical. The guy runs fast. It doesn't show his 10-yard split, but he ran a 5.12 for a 6'4", 302-pound guy. That's a lot of athleticism for a big guy. But he's going to need more help. You know what I mean? Joe Burrow is going to need more help than just Jonah Williams, who has been injury-prone up to this point. And to me, Jonah Williams coming out was a stud. I was high on Jonah Williams, but can he stay healthy? We really don't know. And you can't really bank on Joe Burrow being healthy if you don't have a stable offensive line. So that's why I say the pick is going to be Rashawn Slater. Well, you take that into account. Yes, Ja'Marr Chase could be the pick, but again, I see it being Rashawn Slater, and the reason for that is because the wide receiver position is not a top priority. I'm just going to say this one last thing. The wide receiver position for the Bengals is not as high a priority as it is offensive line. You look at guys like Tyler Boyd. You look at guys that they drafted like T. Higgins. Those are two guys that the Bengals heavily invested in. So if you look at the offensive line side, they really haven't really invested in it. And if they did, those players are injury prone. So you really need a player that's going to be helping Joe Burrow for his longevity in the NFL, for his NFL career, and that's why I believe that Rashawn Slater would be the smarter play. Well, there you have it. I'm just gonna make a rundown on the picks. At number 1, you have Trevor Lawrence going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. At number 2, you have the New York Jets going after Penei Sewell. At number 3, you have the Miami Dolphins going after my man DeVonta Smith. At number 4, you have the Atlanta Falcons taking Zach Wilson. And at number 5, you have the Cincinnati Bengals seize the day, taking Rashawn Slater. Well, that'll be it for today. I hope you liked what I had to say. If you did, please hit the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, as I keep all things Beast. Also, please leave your comments and drop your comments in the description below. Leave a comment, thumbs up the video, or thumbs down if you're that one hater that dislikes all my videos 4 or 5 times. I see you, bro. I see you. You're hating, but you hate to love me. I get it. BEASTwriter, out.